Hi, Jennifer. How are you?
I'm great, Scott. Good to see you.
Good to see you, and thanks for joining me and answering the five questions. Before we do that, though, can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Well, I live in Frederick, Maryland, and I'm a teacher. I'm a musician by training, and so right now I'm teaching from my home music lessons, and then I also teach at the community college here in Frederick, Maryland. But I was raised Church of Christ in California, and I like to always add to my credentials that I'm the daughter of an elder.
Yeah.
Um, and really sort of felt like I couldn't find my feet in any special way for the longest time. And so several years ago, it's been now 10 years since I've started the God Through the Arts ministry.
Yeah.
I kind of just on a lark just sent in an idea to Pepperdine lectureship. Didn't really know where it was going to go, but just sent this idea in that I wanted to do some of the things that I was doing at that time, teaching music appreciation to college students
Yeah.
and using art and so forth. But I hadn't really made the connection myself even. It was very, very much just sort of a whim. And I thought, well, if I get asked to go, it'll be a chance to go to Malibu and be in California during May and out of school during the busiest time. And then if I don't, nothing ventured, nothing gained. And so Jerry Rushford actually called me to find out more about me, and he took a chance on me, and so I went that year, and I sort of followed it up with I think 4 or 5 years in a row.
Wow.
He had me
Yeah.
come. So I really did learn a lot in the process of putting those talks together, and really found my feet, and this became my calling of trying to connect people to God using art of all kinds.
Yeah.
So,
And you've written several books, so I've got one of them here. So, My Dancing Day,
yay!
and had you wrote another one after this. Is that right too?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So you've got two
So,
books.
the first book I wrote again bounced off of some talks I'd given at Pepperdine that were just exploring the arts of Christmas.
Okay.
Again, Christmas wasn't something we really, I mean, we celebrated it when I was growing up, but it wasn't really a sacred holiday for us. It was just a family holiday.
Yeah.
And I just, again, on a whim, kind of picked it because I knew there was a lot of really great classical music and visual arts that I could find pretty easily to put a talk together. And so from doing that, though, I just suddenly was driving down the road one day, and after really meditating on these Annunciation paintings and so forth, and it sort of just hit me like a ton of bricks that
Yeah.
this is amazing.
Yeah.
That the virgin birth and God came Emmanuel.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I really truly believe from my experience that it's very profound to just spend time with a painting or a piece of music and see where it takes you.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people nowadays are interested in entertainment, but maybe not so much art. And so, what's the difference between art and entertainment?
That's a good question. So one of the things that I had to sort of piece out when I was teaching my classes to college students was we would always start off by talking about the different functions of art, which you really don't really think about too much until you have to do something like that. And so I would say that entertainment is an important function of art, but it's not the only one. And I think that that's where we come up short, is by just putting that pressure on it, that's the first and most important part of what art should do. And if it doesn't do that, then I mean, I think good art is something that you experience on a lot of different levels, and it can have a lot of different functions for you. And yeah, sometimes what it is it's helping you escape. It's helping you, enjoy the moment.
Yeah.
So definitely, I don't want us to say that entertainment is a bad thing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, why do human beings need art?
Wow, that's that's a dissertation
Yeah.
type question. I think from my perspective, just from the Christian perspective, what I would say to that question is that there's these wonderful moments in the Bible where God is doing His most important work for us, and He's not saying anything.
Yeah.
And so to really spend time with the birth and the crucifixion and the resurrection and all those wonderful moments in between, you really need some kind of an artistic experience to savor it, to savor the moment and help you bring it to life.
Yeah.
You can't really study a teaching
Yeah.
in those.
Yeah. Well, how
for
have
very long.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, how have the arts benefited your own faith?
So again, I think I just started off by being curious about what I could see other people were doing, and I would sort of ask myself, I wonder why that's such a big deal. Why are there so many composers or visual artists doing something? Why is Mary so important to so many people? Mm-hmm. And so it would be after just sort of pondering what I could see was a huge amount of work from different people that it would then become something more meaningful for myself. And I mean, I did the same thing with Jesus's 7 last words on the cross. I spent one whole sort of winter season. My husband's an Egyptian also, and so we spent one winter. There's like all these composers who've written fantastic, fabulous, works on the 7 last words. There's from over hundreds of, many centuries, and so I knew there had to be something really, really rich in that study of the 7 last words. And so we spent one winter just listening to all these different composers' works and sort of picking out our favorite moments. Yeah. And then I took it and wove, I wove together the 7 last words with paintings and like clips from these different music, and so I had to spend quality time just thinking about the power of each of the 7 last phrases that he said on the cross. And at the end of it, I said, anytime you're going through any dark valley, it's like your own 7-step system to getting through something. First you have to forgive whoever it is who's, whatever situation. There has to be forgiveness, and you have to reach out to other people. You have to, it's healthy to reach out to other people. It's healthy to enlarge your family. It's important to be is okay with railing against God in the moment and saying why that's okay. I think it's wonderful that He says that on the cross, and then just learning to let go and say it's finished.
Yeah.
Into God's hands. I mean, it's really 7 steps to healing in anything, I think. So.
Well, you look back at the history of art, the history of music, and you see many of the great composers and artists were Christian. That comes out in their art. So what I'm thinking about is nowadays the people who are creating art. Is Christian art still being produced today? And if so, what are maybe some examples?
Yeah, I did a little bit of research before we talked because you told me we were going to talk about this. And I have to say it's not really something I do a lot with the contemporary artists because I have to limit myself to things that are in the public domain. So that's things that are painted and written before, I forget the cutoff year. It's something like 1927, something like that.
Yeah.
So, but the first thing that came to my mind is Ron Bisiani's Resurrection mural. Do you know about that work?
Oh, yeah, yeah. So.
Yeah. So that's in the Museum of Biblical Art in Dallas. I haven't seen it personally, but of course I've seen, things on YouTube about it. Are you very far from there? Aren't you in?
Yeah, we're about 3.5 hours. So, yeah, but I didn't know it was in Dallas. So that's something I can go do one
There's
day.
this Museum of Biblical Art in Dallas. We need to meet up there.
Yeah.
So that was one. And then the other artist that I really like is John August Swanson, who's on the cover of my second book, which I should have had here with me. But he is a Catholic artist from California and does these beautiful, really brightly colored, sort of like Mexican mural festival scenes. Yeah. And I love his stuff. And then, there's somebody named He Ki that I like that's a Chinese artist. So there's different people out there. I've noticed that at Pepperdine, they're usually featuring an artist now. They have a little art gallery there. They're trying to feature some kind of artistic and poetry reading thing this time. Okay. So I think there is more and more people exploring these topics of art, Christian art. But sort of the other thing I thought of when you asked me this question is I think art can be sort of in unexpected places and anywhere. Yeah. It doesn't have to say that it's Christian. Yeah. If you're spending time with God and devotional, you can find Christian meaning in things that maybe aren't even originally intended for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Well, so if someone came up to you and they're just kind of wanting to get started on incorporating art into their spiritual life, where should they begin?
So, of course, the first place I'm going to say they should begin is by getting one of my books, or finding me on Facebook, God Through the Arts, because I try to blog regularly using paintings and I just sort of model for people process as I write. There's kind of different methods and angles that I use to create meditations. So that would be my first recommendation is you can either find me on Facebook, God Through the Arts, or on WordPress. Yeah. Or I do have 2 books that I've written using art and music. And in the books, there are lots of resources in them that have like group discussion questions, journaling ideas, and ideas for finding other paintings that aren't in the book. So there's really I definitely had the person who wasn't the expert in mind as sort of this is a way to get your feet wet, kind of thing. Great. But over and above my stuff, one of the ways that I started out was there's this wonderful series of like coffee table books. Okay. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah. That's put out by the Getty Museum. Okay. I think this was the first book that I used. It's called Gospel Figures in Art. Okay. And there's like a whole series of these books. One's about the Old Testament. I think there's one that's on saints. There's all different, and they're not that expensive. I can't remember, maybe $15 or something. For the amount of art, colored, it's really well produced. Yeah. The thing I really like about these, though, is that you can look up. They're sort of like what would you call it? It's easy to like if you have a sermon idea that you're going to work on, you can just look up the story by the name, and it'll show you a couple of painting choices for that story, and then it'll just have arrows pointing to different places in the picture that show you. And it'll like identify the different Christian symbolism for you. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I love using art in my sermons, and I found that it's been very meaningful to people, and so they really connect with that. And so I wasn't familiar with that resource. I appreciate you sharing that with
Yeah,
us.
so like here's one of them that I wrote on my book that's about, I don't know if can you see that? That's
Yeah,
Annunciation painting. I don't know if
yeah.
you can see that very
Oh
well.
yeah, yeah. That's good.
But anyway, it was looking through this that I learned, that there's like a genre of Annunciation paintings and all the different typical things that'll be in them. The fact that they'll always see lilies and that they are a symbol of virginity and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's very Christian symbolism and art is a very rich subject, and so. I mean, you could easily get overwhelmed if you go into one of these art museum bookstores and see, all these different books. And so my recommendation is just stick to the sort of the coffee table, thin little color with short little description. You don't need any more than that.
Yeah, just kind of get started. Yeah.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah. And then the other thing, too, I did right off is I went around and I visited other people's churches. Because we have this neat thing that happens in Frederick that's it's called the Historic Houses of Worship Tour. It happens every Christmas.
Yeah.
And I would always play in one of the churches, and so that's how I got to know it. But it was fascinating to me to see how, the different denominations decorate differently or have different kinds of architecture and what the focal point of each fellowship would have.
Yeah.
And some fellowships are very, much into Jesus and his suffering on the cross, and others are more into the resurrection, and then others don't have either one. So, you see Mary a lot more in others. So it's fascinating to go and see how their different sanctuaries are.
Yeah.
Kind of decked out.
We're far apart here, but we have something similar right here in my area. It's called the Painted Churches Tour. So I'm sure there are probably lots of those around the United States, if you just kind of look around and do some research.
Well, and then, I went one time to visit my mother in Norman, Oklahoma, and I had been there a lot of times, and I'd seen all the typical, we'd done everything, and she was wanting to know what I wanted to do, and I'm like, well, are there any pretty churches in Norman? And we ended up going all around, not only Norman but Oklahoma City, and there were some marvelous examples, and everybody thought we were like hunting for a place to have a wedding. So we just sort of went with that. But
yeah. Okay.
That was really fun.
Yeah.
So that's a neat thing to do.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jennifer, for giving us your time and telling us a little bit about arts and faith. And I'll post the links to your books and your blog and all that, throw that up on Facebook and the internet, so that when people see this video, they can also connect with you in those ways as well.
But Scott, I had one more thought. Can I add?
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
This morning, again, when I was thinking about where you find art and something powerful, there's a little commercial that I have seen on TV recently that features, I think it's maybe a Subaru commercial,
Yeah.
but it features this little dog who is observing his master, his mistress, who she's got a new boyfriend.
Yeah.
And do you know the one I'm talking about? And it's like the dog doesn't like the boyfriend. Maybe there's been lots of boyfriends come and go.
Yeah, I don't know because we don't do like any TV, so I don't see commercials.
Okay.
So.
But anyway, it's a fascinating little commercial to me. I love watching it because it's so sweet, because she really likes this guy and the dog's just not having any of it. And then finally, when they're sitting next to a campfire and he puts his jacket around her, and the dog observes that he puts his jacket around her, and then all of a sudden the dog accepts him. So it's like the dog is like won over by the guy because he can see that this guy's a good guy. He's a good guy.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm so touched by that is because I kind of see the God story in that. I feel like God is doing a lot, in the Bible, we're reading these stories where God is, it's a courtship,
Mm-hmm.
and He's trying to win us over. And we're like the little dog sitting back, kind of not sure if we can trust a lot of times until we see something that touches our heart like that, and then we're won over. And so I think you can find art in surprising places, things that touch your heart in surprising ways, and it really is a matter of allowing God and the Holy Spirit to woo your heart.
Mm. Yeah.
Until you can't resist Him any longer.
Yeah. Well, hey, thanks for sharing that with us, and that's a great place to end. Again, thank you for your time.
All right. Bye.